welcome from, oh, we have started recording. We're going to start off with a welcome from Nikki, and we will go from here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We were the recipients in 2022 for a successful grant with the Government of Alberta Civil Society Fund. They believed in the importance of spreading the awareness and supports of endowment building strategies across the province for charitable organizations. We designed a toolkit, and we'll be able to go through that a little bit today through this webinar, and the toolkit will be provided to each one of you at the end of today's webinar. The toolkit is designed to be a workable resource to help you and your boards determine if endowments are in fact a good fit for your organization and how your local community foundation can support the efforts in establishing and building long-term financial sustainability. So I'm Nikki Gray. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Foundation of Medicine Hat in Southeastern Alberta. And Sydney.
And my name is Sydney Ratzlaff. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator, also with the Community Foundation of Southeastern Alberta, and I will be moderating the panel discussion today.
Thank you, Sid. We'd like to acknowledge the land that we're on today. So all of Southeastern Alberta, we oversee quite a large range. So I do want to bring awareness to that as well. So in the spirit of respect, truth, and reciprocity, I acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. I am grateful for the traditional elders and knowledge keepers who are still with us today, and for those who have gone before us. We are currently on Treaty 6 and Treaty 7, now known as Medicine Hat, where we have incredible opportunities to immerse ourselves in the rich history of Indigenous culture here.
Today, we will hear from a number of panelists. On this webinar with us, we have Laura, the Chief Executive Officer from Northwestern Alberta Foundation. We have Caleb with MNP and Medicine Hat, helping us understand the tax implications with endowment funds. We have Paul, who's the Chief Executive Officer with Halo Air Ambulance. They are a organization who has an agency fund established. And we have Charlene, the Executive Director of the Community Foundation of Lethbridge and Southwestern Alberta. So later on in the webinar, we will have a discussion and ask these experts some questions. And as we're going through the presentation too, we just encourage you to put any questions you have in the chat so that we can all see it. Or you can ask a question directly to myself or Bailey, and we will direct those questions to the panelists if you would like that on your behalf. So yeah, feel free to ask questions throughout, and we will address them at the end.
Thank you, Laura, Caleb, and Paul, and Charlene. So today, first of all, I'm pleased to welcome our peers who are representing many community foundations across Alberta. Today's webinar will provide an introduction and snapshot of how an organization can partner with their local community foundation to support long-term financial sustainability. We will discuss what a community foundation is, what endowments are, how they work, and how to grow them. I do want to mention, and you'll hear me mention it throughout the webinar, each community foundation primarily has the same mission to support the charitable capacity within their regions. However, their key terms, how they do certain things might be a little bit different. So we just encourage you to connect with your local community foundation after today's webinar to learn more. So there are 205 community foundations across Canada who are working to strengthen community well-being. They have a collective primary mission to inspire and create long-term and meaningful philanthropy in a defined geographic area. They're able to do this by consulting with and engaging regularly with community members and key stakeholders, incorporating a diverse set of perspectives to inform locally driven decisions and championing solutions for issues that matter most to their community. They do this through community knowledge and data, relationship building, fund development, impact investing, and grant making. Although community foundations from coast to coast have relatively the same mission and opportunities, their key terms, definitions, and processes do differ. We encourage you to connect directly with your local community foundation. So an endowment fund is a pooled investment held in perpetuity, which means forever, and creates a source of revenue. So introductions to endowments, we'll talk about what endowment funds are, what an agency endowment fund is, and I know other community foundations call them something different, but it's an endowment fund that supports a specific organization. We'll talk about what principal is, contributions, what they may look like, what a fund holder is, disbursements, and restricted and unrestricted funding. An endowment fund within is a permanently endowed fund, which a portion of the investment revenue is issued back to a charitable organization to enhance their charitable purpose in accordance to their bylaw and charitable status. The principal of an endowment fund is the cash value of the investment, including initial and any future contributions made to the funds. So many community foundations have a policy in place to protect the principal of the funds and to ensure they are never spent. Contributions can be made by any donor or organization itself to help build an endowment. And a fund holder is an individual, a family, or in this case, the organization who has established an endowment fund with a community foundation. The disbursement is the paying out or dispersing of money from the fund. Each year, a check is issued to each agency endowment fund holder as an annual disbursement. Now, when it comes to restricted and unrestricted funding, endowments held in perpetuity are meant for a specific purpose, meaning it's not accessible for general purpose use. Once it is endowed, the donor organization is unable to take it back. However, the money dispersed each year is considered to be unrestricted and can be used under the discretion of the charity's board to help further their charitable purpose. So how does this all work? Anyone can be a donor and contribute a gift, small or large, to an endowment fund at any time. Once it's created, its cyclical endowment process begins. Within each cycle, income is gained and then distributed to your organization for community impact. With an endowment fund, there are various regulations and restrictions that need to be managed to ensure the fund maximizes its earnings, minimizes its risks, and abides by financial laws. Essentially, each aspect is managed by the subject matter expert, fund and investment expertise by the community foundation, and disbursement management by the charity. This infographic here also within the toolkit that you'll receive at the end of today's webinar shows a typical community foundation endowment process. Again, this may look different a little bit compared to other community foundations, but it does provide a good snapshot. So the principle here, donor gifts are pooled with the community foundation's endowment assets and invested through careful stewardship. So this is a responsibility of the community foundation that you work with. The interest, so principal investments earn the interest. And for the disbursement, interest earnings are distributed annually, minus any fees, which differ across the province. And they're distributed annually back to the agency to be dispersed. Funds can be used to further any charitable activities for that organization. Any remaining earnings, additional contributions, and unrealized gains or losses are factored into the principal, which is never spent, and the endowment continues to grow, and the cycle continues. This is a lot of information. I do want to ensure that everyone who's on today knows that their community foundation representatives and ourselves are here for any support going forward, and can come in and talk to your boards or provide any additional resources to help process and come to a good decision for what fits best with your organization. So why an endowment? Establishing an endowment fund with a community foundation allows donors to support local needs in a lasting way that matches the donor's wishes and helps to attract and retain other donors. There are many tax benefits for individuals who donate to an endowment fund, which community foundation staff can help you navigate these benefits along with your auditors and working with your donors, professional advisors to help support any decision-making on giving to your endowment. So there are pros and cons, and in the toolkit, there's a whole page of them. It all is by perspective and dependent on what your needs are for your board. The decision to establish an endowment fund should not be made quickly or lightly. Pros and cons may help to inform your organization's decision. And the list is included in the toolkit and has been categorized into agency or your organization, donor and fundraiser groups to help consider the impact and work on endowment an endowment will have on each. So one of the examples here we have a pro symbolizes permanency and longevity. A con could be that the investment principal is permanently restricted and bound to the endowment, therefore can't be accessed if required. So when an agency or an organization has come to us who is interested in establishing an agency fund or an endowment fund with our community foundation, their biggest concern is, what if we need the money back? And we like to encourage them to think outside of who can give to their agency funds. Paul will talk later with Halo, who actually worked with a donor to establish an endowment fund for Halo. So they got it up and running. They didn't have to go into their reserves with their organization into their finances to establish a fund. They can rely on their donors that they already have who are interested in keeping the longevity of an organization intact and working with them and the community to help grow the endowment. So it's not necessarily just the organization that needs to get this up and running. So endowment growth. We always say to start by setting goals, defining policies, and soliciting donations. So a big question that we always encourage boards to look at is, does your organization have an investment policy and gift management policy? What happens to a donation that comes into your organization that is meant for an endowment if you already have one established? Or is there a portion or percentage of unsolicited or undesignated donations? Or is there a percentage of that going into an endowment? So that's something that your board will need to consider when establishing an endowment fund with a community foundation, just to ensure you're in line with what the board's direction is. And if you have those already in place, do they need to be revised if an endowment is established? And we have many examples of some policies and some wording that we are welcome to share with you. There is one included in the toolkit that you'll receive later on. But if you're looking for more, either your local community foundation or our office can definitely send out some templates for that. As for marketing and communications, it's important to be clear in your messaging, both internally and externally, about what an endowment fund means for your organization. Excuse me. Communicating with your donors about an endowment fund is an important step to take to ensure your donors are aware of the unique needs of your organization. Your communication strategy will depend on the message you're wishing to share, while keeping in mind that endowments should show that the organization is dedicated and committed to continuing their services for many years, and not necessarily that they aren't in need of day-to-day operational funding. We do have a donor communication example that can be shared with organizations. Then there are a couple of links in the digital toolkit as well. Endowment funds are suggested as an option for community foundation donors and marketed along with the range of funds we offer. So our community foundation does let the community and the general public know which organizations have endowment funds with our community foundation, and therefore provides that additional option for them to give to. This has been quite attractive to many of our donors who are pleased to see that an organization has taken the step to establish an endowment fund and want to support that as well. And as for donor stewardship, people give to your organization because they believe in the difference that you make in the community. So be genuinely grateful for donations of any size, and make sure every donor feels acknowledged and appreciated each time they give, whether it's to an endowment or not. I'm sure many of you are aware of that donor stewardship is important, and it's no different if you have an endowment or not. And then we encourage organizations who have agency funds or endowment funds with us to make it super easy. Share information on your website, social media, and wherever your potential supporters might look. They may not want to come to you directly, so provide easy ways to find information for themselves, such as links to the donation page in your newsletters and other communications. Sometimes working with your local community foundation, they'll be able to support your wishes on how to communicate that, or it could be a joint process working with your community foundation to let the public know about the option of giving to an endowment fund for your organization. So bequests. This is always a bit of or can be a touchy subject for some organizations. Your organization's regular donors can leave a bequest through the community foundation to create a personal legacy and benefit for your organization forever if there is an endowment established at that community foundation. Community foundations can facilitate even the most complex planned gifts or gifts of appreciated stock or real estate. Working with professional advisors and letting them know of which organizations with our community foundation have endowment funds also provides that kind of wide range scope of the people that are aware of who has those agency funds, and that it is an option for a bequest. When it comes to asking your donors to consider leaving their life's work to an organization or to your endowment, it can sometimes be a sensitive subject. We recommend taking extra care with the language you use. The conversation isn't necessarily about the size of gift, death, or even dying. It's about offering an opportunity for letting a donor's legacy and passion live on. I know from experience, when you approach the conversation in such a way, you can ignite a flame and witness your donors or prospective donors' excitement. And making it normal and easy is a great way to talk about bequests. So dedicate a page on your website for wills and estates, including the opportunity to in annual year-end campaigns as an option to include in your organization in a will. Make it a part of your boards and teams' everyday language. Create a culture within your organization to help provide guidance and support about talking to donors and the community about bequest giving. If you're in the nonprofit world, you're already pretty good with people. And so reading the room and knowing your audience and knowing when it's no longer comfortable to talk about, and really following your instincts in that direction will let you know whether the donor or prospective donor is wishing to talk about a bequest at this time or not. And sometimes all it is just planting a seed. So we encourage to continue to build relationships with your current, new, and prospective donors. Tell your stories and ask your donors to tell the community their stories. Why do they give, and what inspires them to leave a legacy? We're happy to help support your organization with this, or working with your local community foundation. Are experts in this area as well. And so they'll be able to support any initiatives you have to help discuss bequests with your donors, or leaving a bequest to an endowment fund. So the majority of this webinar will be our panel discussion. So that was just a snapshot. We'll get to the nitty-gritty with the panel discussion coming up here. I will stop sharing my screen so you can see the people who pop up to answer any of their questions. Sydney will be the moderator, and I just ask the panelists who are answering the questions just to turn their camera on so people can see your faces while they answer the questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki, for that presentation. One question did come in, and I'm not sure if you just want to address it right now, Nikki?
Sure.
Nodding. Okay, so is it possible for the fund holder board to years later decide to withdraw some or all of the principal?
Not typically. Some community foundations offer some flexibility with a spend down fund. It does look different than a true in perpetuity endowment fund. That I would encourage that individual to connect with their local community foundation to see if that is an option. And then I see a second question there too. Does the fund holder have to be a registered charity for donor to receive a tax credit? No. If there is an affiliation or partnership with a community foundation and a nonprofit group who isn't registered, there is the option that a donor is able to flow that through directly to a charitable organization and receive a tax receipt from the community foundation. Canada Revenue Agency has just released the reporting guidelines on what it looks like for a community foundation to directly fund a nonprofit group. Up until late 2021 or early 2022, we were directed that we cannot give directly to a nonprofit. They have to be qualified donates, which is a registered charity with CRA, a school division, or municipality. And there has been some flexibility with that, and some community foundations are in fact directly funding nonprofit groups. So again, I encourage you to connect with your local community foundation to ensure that's a possibility. I know some of the representatives and panelists here today do directly fund some nonprofits, so they might be able to answer that question for you as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. And thank you, Murray, for asking those questions. Feel free to continue to pop questions into the chat there. I'm excited to open up the panelist discussion. Again, if you missed the beginning, I just want to reintroduce our panelists today. So from the Northwestern Alberta Community Foundation, Laura LaValle, the CEO, is here with us. Hi, Laura. From the Community Foundation of Lethbridge in southeastern Alberta, we have Charlene Davidson, who's the executive director there. Welcome, Charlene. We have a tax specialist with us, Caleb Hagemeister. He is a partner with MNP And lastly, we have an agency fund holder, Paul Carolan with the Halo Air Ambulance is here. He is the CEO with Halo. And so he will be sharing the agency side of things, the organization side of things. So we will be kicking off some questions here. And yeah. Excited to hear what you guys have to share. Laura, I'm going to start with you just to give you a heads up. The first question I'd like to ask you, Laura, is who can establish an agency endowment fund and what amount is required to do so?
Thanks for the question, Sydney, and thank you so much, Nikki, for asking me to join in today. Really, any community service organization is able to create an agency fund. As Nikki talked about, community foundations are kind of individually deciding if they're going to play in that field of funding non-qualified donees versus qualified donees. At Northwestern Alberta Foundation, our board has decided to move forward with funding non-qualified donees because as you can appreciate in our area, we have so many non-qualified donees that are deserving of our support. So we are moving in that direction. We do like to see that they're registered as a society, and some other considerations for individual community foundations might be how long has the organization been in existence? Does your community foundation have a solid relationship with that group? Just those sorts of things to make sure that you're doing the due diligence before you're entering into this type of agreement. For us, we have no minimum amount for starting a fund at Northwestern Alberta Foundation, although I know that lots of other community foundations, as well as how it's outlined in the toolkit, is that we recommend the $5,000 initial gift.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. I will jump over to Paul. Paul, what is your organization's goal with the Agency Endowment Fund?
Thanks for the question, Sydney, and thanks to everybody for having me. So our goal is in the very short term is to have our agency fund be able to fund one position on the administrative side of our program. So for the time being, we're actually reinvesting our disbursements to get the endowments to a point where it can generate that kind of revenue. So to be more specific, we're looking for that to, those disbursements to reach kind of that $80,000 to $100,000 range on an annual basis. And we're committed to making sure that we have continued contributions to the principal and reinvest those disbursements to allow that to reach that level. In the long term, there is no specific goal. Obviously, the more funding that we can provide from a stability perspective from the endowment, the much more it helps us as an organization plan for the future. And so we want to continue to grow our endowment and make sure that it's there forever to make sure that it can provide those services that we provide to the community.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Charlene, this next question is for you. What advantage is there to work with a community foundation to establish and grow an endowment fund?
I'm actually going to change that question to what are the advantages, because there are many. When I was looking at this yesterday, I actually sent Nikki a text and said, how long do I have? So I'm going to say the first of the many advantages is our expertise. This is what we do. This is what we do every day. This is what we're set up to do. This is our purpose, is to have these endowment funds. So coming to us, you're really coming to the experts and the authorities on this. I'll also talk about customer service. Most community foundations all community foundations that I know have an amazing team. They're here and are passionate about supporting the community. So working with us with your endowment fund brings that passion into your work with the endowment fund. We have all sorts of information on the needs of our community, whether it's through our existing grants program and the work that we're already doing, or whether it's through the vital signs research and publications that most community foundations put out. We know what the needs of the community are. We know where there are areas that need some additional support. We know who the players are. Our endowment funds are professionally managed. We don't manage it. It's professionally managed, again, by the experts. That's what they do. We all have an investment committee. We all have investment policy to make sure that that investment is being well cared for, that our that we're maximizing return, but keeping risk to a minimum, all professionally done. Our fees are low. Our community foundation charges 1%, and that's all inclusive. So we don't charge by the transaction. So if you know, we have a donor who does about 10 grants through their fund every year. She pays 1%, just like everyone else. We don't charge additional for that. What else can I say about that? We start a fund as low as $1,000. You are required to grow it to 10, but 1,000, so you can come in at a rate that's affordable for you. There are endless options for the fund type that you want. I know you guys are looking at an endowment for a charity. There are options for how that can work. There are options for how you can donate. Everything from a trade of securities to a bequest, a life insurance policy to EFTs. Most of us can accept an EFT. Lots of ways to give. And we do the heavy lifting. We file with the CRA. You don't have to do that work. We file with the CRA. We're reputable. We're responsible. We're audited annually. Boards are arm's length. And we are a CRA registered charity ourselves, so we can tax receipt those gifts. And I'll stop talking there because this is my swan song. I could go on forever.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate it. You are welcome to chat as much as you want. There are many advantages, and thank you for sharing all of those. Caleb, we're moving over to our tax specialist here. What is required for an organization to report on endowment funds for their assets?
Thanks, Sydney, and thanks everyone for having me. So I guess it depends if you're looking at it from the perspective of the organization having its own endowment fund, or if it's an organization that has an agency endowment fund. So if the assets are inside of the charity itself, then it would get reported on as a part of their assets and reported on the charity return, and needing to be mindful of the distribution requirements, the 3.5% under $1 million and 5% over the $1 million. Now, if it's held through an agency endowment fund, then they don't have to report anything. It's not their asset, it's the community foundation's asset. So then they would only have to report on the donations received from the endowment fund throughout the year.
Wonderful. Another advantage there. All right. I'm moving back over to Laura. What is the difference between an endowment fund and a reserve fund?
So typically a reserve fund within an organization is sort of that rainy day fund that is set aside for times that it may be running a deficit with your budget, or unexpected types of things that occur. A reserve fund can be here today and gone tomorrow, depending on what the board decides to do with the funding. It can be used in a lump sum. Typically, there's not a lot of timelines. It just can sit there until it is needed. And it's typically not pooled with other funds. So typically reserve funds see less returns than what an endowment fund might see. An endowment fund is pooled with more funds, so that there can be more significant returns. It typically very consistently gives back year over year to promote that sustainability for your organization to be receiving some income from the endowment fund. They're held in perpetuity, so there's sustainability for that organization essentially forever. And really, there's a huge opportunity, as Charlene mentioned, for your donors to use this fund to direct estate gifts, to transfer appreciated securities, real estate. Just the options to give are far more. Typically, donors aren't donating towards reserve funds, but yet they can understand and get behind the concept of donating to an endowment fund that is to build the sustainability for an organization for, till the end of time. So those are the key differences between endowment and reserve funds.
Great, thank you so much, Laura. Good explanation. Back to you, Charlene. Can you tell us all how an endowment is managed?
Sure. I think we've covered a bit of this. The initial gift is invested in perpetuity. All community foundations funds are professionally managed with a professional investment firm. all community foundations will have an investment policy that dictates how that firm has to manage that money. So usually it's a 60-40 type split, but there's discretion that they can work with the market. So if something's dropping and something's gaining, they can shift the assets around a bit in that. The investment company has to report back to the community foundation so that we know that they're in compliance with our policies. We know exactly what our endowment fund is doing. We meet with them. What else can I tell you here? And we also, sorry, this is the key piece for all of you. We report back to you. So at my organization, we send out an annual fund report that tells you exactly what your opening balance was, any income that your fund earned, capital gains or losses, unfortunately, sometimes, what our fee is, any grants that you went out, so you know exactly where your fund is sitting. Some of the other foundations have newer technology than us. We're coming into that this year, though, where you can actually log in and you can check your balance like you would do your online banking. So you will know at any given time where your endowment fund is sitting.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlene. Paul, this next question is for you. Who decides how distributions are spent at your organization?
Thanks, Sid. So we're fairly new into our endowments, and we approach this very deliberately and collaboratively. So we had a long conversation with our board of directors about sort of what the intention was and what we were hoping to accomplish with the endowment. And so we report on that regularly. The accounting statement that was just mentioned, we share that annually with our board of directors, and they're aware of what is sitting in our endowment. Generally speaking, that decision to make those disbursements has been a group decision as well. I think as we get a larger endowment and start to achieve those goals that we're hoping for in the future, we will revisit that. But for the time being, it's a very simple decision for us. We're all on the same page. We're committed to growing the fund and establishing that future. And so we know where all of those decisions are being made and how quickly they can be made.
Great, thank you. Caleb, this next one's for you. What does the Canada Revenue Agency require for reporting on an agency endowment fund?
Yeah, thanks, Sydney. The organization that has the agency endowment fund doesn't have any additional reporting on that. It's not their assets, so it's not theirs to report on. That would be the community foundation that would have to report on it. The CRA was looking at potentially having there being internal trusts, but recent information came out about November 10th, and it's still ongoing, is that they're looking at exempting endowment funds from that so that they don't have to report with the new trust rules. I would advise that if you do have other internal trusts inside of your charity, to check with your tax advisor to see if those are also exempt or if they fall under that. But as far as endowment funds go, they are exempt from the new trust reporting rules. So the organization that has the agency endowment fund with community foundation, they would just have to report the regular amounts received as revenue on their charity return.
Great, thank you. Paul, I'm jumping back to you. How do you talk to your donors about the agency endowment fund?
Oh, what a great question. I'll provide some context. I admit that establishing an endowment fund for Halo was a challenging decision. I have a group of board members who have been around a long time and who were a part of those really difficult decisions in the past about literally what invoices to pay and whether or not the program was going to be able to survive not only things like the pandemic, but even years past. And so while knowing what I know now, I hope that we would have definitely established an endowment. The donor that Nikki mentioned that established it on our behalf really set us forward, quite frankly, years. And so I think it's really important to recognize that our endowment inspired intention, our commitment to invest in our future, thereby looking ahead not only days and months, but years and even decades. Our endowment has changed our culture. It's changed our strategies. It's changed our communication. And by committing to our endowment, we make a future focus commonplace. Of course, it's our obligation, my team's obligation, to ensure that we'll be here today and tomorrow but we have a duty, I think, to ensure that we will be, and perhaps more importantly, plan to be here forever. More specifically to your question, and it's very serendipitous because at one of your events recently, I was fortunate to sit with both a community foundation and a Halo supporter. And they, in fact, shared with us that we were meant to receive a bequest. So they brought it up, so I didn't have to, so that was helpful. And we knew each other well enough to both laugh when we said sort of at the same time, hopefully not for a long time. But as we discussed that further, I became aware that their plan had been to make that bequest a follow through the community foundation, and my understanding would be that would be the entire sum that they had listed just would come through you guys as opposed to from them directly. So this was a natural opportunity to talk about Halo's endowment and the fact that we were investing in our future and making sure that we were going to be around for decades to come. And so we agreed to meet in 2024 and talk about whether they should provide that entire flow through as a one lump sum contribution to Halo, or whether they should, as community foundation investors themselves, dedicate part, if not all of that, to our endowments as well. So we've taken a very transparent and honest approach with our donors. I think by having our culture change and being willing to be committed to contributing ourselves, it makes that conversation so much easier when you're talking to a donor. And I think the other piece, and it certainly was highlighted in the toolkit, this opens up donors that we may not have access to because the community foundation is talking about agency funds that are held with your organization. And certainly we've come across people who have become aware of Halo and become aware of our need because of that partnership. And I don't think you can put a value on that because it makes such a huge difference, and it's really a force multiplier on not only the investment side but the opportunity side.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we appreciate the work that you've done working with your donors and sharing this vision. This is just a side note, one of Paul's quotes that he gave us to use for social media. He says the funds that are distributed to their agency each year keeps Halo in flight for your life today, tomorrow, and forever. And I think that just really speaks to their vision for the future. And that's the idea behind these agency endowments. So thank you. Our last formal question of today is for Caleb. What advantage is there for donors to contribute to an agency endowment fund?
It'd be similar to making a donation to a charity directly. They do get a donation receipt for that. Now, it's more tax effective to do it through a corporation if you are going to be donating funds because you get a deduction, whereas if you donate it as an individual, you get a tax credit. And the other effective way to do it is to donate securities, publicly listed securities, rather than selling the securities, topping it up. Then there's additional level of tax. Whereas if you donate the securities themselves, you're saving on that, the tax there. And then if you donate through a corporation, then you also get access to what's called the capital dividend account, where you can potentially extract funds out of the company tax-free as a result of the donation. So the advantage would be some tax savings there, and then also other things that the other panelists have talked about, economies of scale, sort of growing your donation through that.
Great, well, thank you. I encourage you, if you have some questions, you can either pop them in the chat, or you're welcome to turn your camera on and raise your hand and I'll go through some. I just wanted to highlight Chris Christie. She made a comment here. She wanted to point out another advantage to having the endowment fund at a community foundation is that there may be many existing donors who may be interested in contributing to your newly established endowment once that is established. So another advantage there. Thank you. Dore is asking, if the organization were to close, what happens to the endowment fund? Charlene or Laura, would one of you like to address that?
I can tell you what we would do at our organization. When the fund is established, we would provide for that in the fund agreement. And what we do is we would designate it to the next most similar charity. So if it was supporting animals, we would keep it with animals. The option would also be to put it into our unrestricted fund. So we would, if the charity is dissolving, we would have that conversation with your board of directors, but we would account for that in the initial agreement and hope that it doesn't ever happen.
Thank you, Charlene. Laura, would you guys have something similar, or did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just added to the chat that that's aligned with how we would handle it here too.
Perfect. Thank you both. And thank you again to Caleb and Paul, Charlene and Laura for answering all those questions we're throwing at you. Really appreciate your expertise and insight, and yeah, just what you brought to the discussion today. So thank you. If we were in person, we'd all clap for you. So I'm clapping. Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions come in yet, but I'll give it a moment here. All right, what is the interest funds dispersed? Example, the fund is $100,000. Then what? That is the question right now. Laura, Charlene, or Nikki? Nikki wants to answer that? All right.
That one, sure. This is such a loaded question, and each community foundation works a little bit differently, but at our community foundation, it is based on a 3-year rolling average for the rate of return. So it depends on how your fund is being managed and the losses and gains that it has seen. And then we disperse according to Canada Revenue Agency's disbursement quota. Right now it's set at 5%. Board of directors at each community foundation determine what the percentage of granting is each year. So it really depends on what your fund is sitting at, what the fees are at that local community foundation, and then also what the disbursement quota is. So anything that is not directly dispersed back to your organization will be reinvested to help the fund grow. I encourage you there is an example in the toolkit of what that might look like. Additionally, just connecting with us and we can kind of walk it through with you and provide some examples. I don't know if Charlene or Laura want to add anything else to that.
No, I think that would answer from our end as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we definitely do have an example in the toolkit, and we will be sending that out afterwards. So have a look at that, and hopefully that gives you an idea at least. Another question that came in, I think this might be for you, Caleb. Can you further explain the CRA disbursement quota?
Yeah, it's a required amount that a charity is required to disperse on qualified activities throughout the year. So Nikki had said it's 5%, anything over $1 million. So then you're required to disperse that out to your donees, and it needs to be based on the fair market value of the property as well. It's not just what you've put in, it's the fair market value. So if you put in $1 million and it's grown to 1.5, your quota is based on the fair market value. Or it can get more complex as if you have, say, real property like land and building, then that you need to be constantly valuing your property to know how much your disbursement quota needs to be. So it's a required amount by the CRA to ensure that charities are dispersing funds, to ensure they're actually being used and not hoarded and grown for unnecessary reasons, to make sure that the charities are accomplishing their goal.
Great, thank you. Did that explain that for you, Murray? If there are any other questions, feel free to pop on. You can turn your camera on and mic on if you want to just ask the panelists directly, or feel free to put it into the chat box here. Okay, Caleb, I have a question for you that just came in. Can you talk about the anti-directed legislation and if it would impact these funds?
I'd have to look into that a little bit more. That's something that's a little more specific that I hadn't prepared for this presentation.
not to worry. Maybe I can, would you be able to look into it in the future? I can connect you with this person.
Yeah, if you send the question, and then it could be, I guess, whether it's a matter of it being a tax question or whether it's a legal question, that would be two other things that you might have to consult a lawyer on the matter as well.
That makes sense for sure. All right. Another question that came in is, so the principal may decrease if it returns are less than 5. I think this is back to your CRA disbursement quota, Caleb.
Well, I guess the intention would be that you'd only be dispersing what's over and above the principal, and then it would grow, and then you'd have to disperse that.
Most community foundations have a bit of a policy to protect that principal. So, and are looking into different alternative investments to ensure that they're able to disperse the minimum of 5%. The goal is never to touch the principal.
Can I just add to that? We encourage a fund in its first year with us to sit so that it can earn a little bit of income, so that when we do have a year with where returns underperform, the market underperforms, we're still not dipping into that initial contribution.
Good point, Charlene. Lots of community foundations hold on to a new fund for 12 to 18 months to be able to earn enough investment revenue. Exactly.
Yeah.
Point. So we allotted an hour and a half for today because I wasn't sure how long Charlene would talk for. I'm just joking. But
I can keep going.
Yeah, I know. I encourage like any of my other community foundation peers who are on, who wants to add anything or to hop on. This toolkit and project was very much supported by community foundations in Alberta. So if you want to speak on anything, I welcome you to do so right now. And then we will kind of let everybody go after that. If you have any questions and want to stay on, please feel free. We'll stick around. Go ahead, Charlene.
You opened the door for me. I want to piggyback onto Chris catching my my slipped piece of information. You know, establishing a fund with a community foundation, we work with you to help you grow that fund. We're happy to talk with your donors and have those conversations, because it is a hard decision for a lot of folks, especially when they're looking at estate planning and setting up their will. You know, people worry about, am I making the right decision? That's where our expertise comes in really, really handy, because we are able to answer some of the questions you might not be able to answer. So if you do want to proceed with establishing an agency fund at a community foundation, work with your community foundation, because they're going to help you navigate all of it. Having those conversations with donors, they're going to come out to your AGM if you want. They're going to support you to help you grow this fund. So I really encourage you to work closely with them.
Thank you, Charlene. Is there any other community foundations members that would like to share your experience or the impact of agency endowments? On the flip side, if there's any organizations who have also set up an endowment, or just want to share your experience, maybe talking with your board about this. We considered having breakout rooms, but we just thought kind of a larger discussion for people to ask questions or see what's kind of been done in the past might be helpful for people. Doesn't seem like anyone's excited to share right now. That's okay. We've had and answered a lot of questions, so I think this has been a really great panel discussion. So again, thank you to Caleb, Laura, Charlene, and Paul, and of course Nikki, thank you for the presentation at the beginning. I'll turn it back over to you, Nikki. I think you had a couple closing slides there.
Sure. I won't turn my screen back on for the slides, but I did want everyone to know that your community foundation wants you to succeed. They want you to continue the work that you do in your community. The endowment building toolkit is only one way that community foundations are looking at to support the charitable sector. Our office is able to provide resources and ongoing support while encouraging you to work with your local community foundation to discuss strategies to support your long-term financial sustainability. And talking to your board and presenting to your board, that is what we do. At the end of this webinar, a digital toolkit will be sent to the email you used to register, along with the recording of the webinar. Again, please connect with our office directly or with your community foundation for any further information. We don't want the conversation to end today. We want to be able to help you through this process. It can take months to years to get to the point of establishing something, but all of the community foundations want you to know that we're there to walk that journey with you and to support you in any way that we can. So thanks again. If any questions come to you after today's webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, and have a great rest of your day. You get an extra half an hour.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll hopefully connect with you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Sydney,
Mm-hmm.
do you mind just sending me that question via email, and I can look into it a little bit more, and then I can redirect the findings back to you if you want to pass it on to the person?
I will do that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Caleb.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, everyone.